and welcome to the Spatina webinar. And my name is Ilkka Rinne. I'm the head of customer experience and interoperability here at Spatina. Today our topic is the new INSPIRE Metadata Technical Guidance version. That is the 2.0 version, and I'll go quite rapidly within the next 50 minutes or so through the major changes in the technical guidance. Also, both from the actual content of the document viewpoint and from the viewpoint of the metadata requirements that have been changed from the previous version. Now I have to remind you that at this point, this document 2.0 has not been endorsed by the INSPIRE MIG-P. So this is still a work in progress. However, the MIG-T has reviewed this document already, and as we speak, the final editing work is being done by the JRC staff. So at the moment, it is expected that the submission for the MIG-P will be done already before the end of October. And if there are no blocking comments, it's expected that the document will be endorsed by the MIG-P by the end of this year. So some minor details, or who knows, some details can still change in this process. So so be aware of this. That this is some of the details that I'll present might still change in the final document. So this presentation is based on the candidate release version 4 and some of my experience working as an editor of this document during last spring. So very briefly, I think that most of you know what INSPIRE Metadata is. You've been working with that before, but very quickly, INSPIRE Metadata is a set of formal descriptions for INSPIRE spatial datasets and services. And the idea is to be able to access those datasets using a computer-aided discovery mechanism. So it's a formal way of describing the datasets and services that is machine readable. Now the creation of and maintaining, publishing of these metadata descriptions is mandatory for the EU member states by the INSPIRE regulation. And the structure and the content of the metadata follows the ISO metadata model for geographic information. And that is the 19115 ISO specification. And the XML code encoding of that abstract ISO metadata model is given in another ISO standard, which is the 19139. So why was the technical guidance document changed and even made a major version change to 2.0? The background, I think, is there were some issues identified with the technical guidance by the member states, including that the metadata requirements were actually given in several separate documents. So some of the metadata elements for spatial data services were given in the technical guidance for those services. Some were given in the metadata elements for interoperability, and some in the data specifications, which are the theme-specific elements. So the idea was that all these requirements should be collected into the same technical guidance document. Also, there are some more detailed things that needed to be clarified, including the unique resource identifiers, coupled resources, limitations on public access and conditions for access and use, language neutral identifiers, for example, how the INSPIRE code list value should be referenced within the metadata. And also, one important thing is that the metadata validation should be easier to do automatically. So the abstract test sheets were missing. They are still work in progress. The conformance classes and the requirements, for example, did not have unique identifiers which could be used in the registry to actually refer exactly to those requirements. And there were some other minor issues also we identified. So for this, the MIG subgroup 8 started working on the metadata technical guidance in autumn 2014. Now I'm going to first cover the changes in the actual document structure. So as you will see, the document is structured a bit differently than the version 3.1. One of the big changes actually from the technical point of view is that in the 2.0 version, we are trying to explicitly require a certain XML encoding for the metadata. So in the previous technical guidance 3.1, it was a profile of the abstract ISO metadata models with an annex for the actual XML encoding. And in this 2.0 version, the starting point is that you have to use the XML encoding. So it's more like a profile of that XML encoding. So the profile of ISO 19139 rather than the abstract models. And the idea was, the reason behind this is that since we wanted everybody was already using the XML encoding and the schemas, so it was a bit difficult to justify the higher abstraction level for the requirements, which would not have necessarily been directly requiring a certain XML elements to be used, for example. And also that from, for example, the software developers' point of view, we wanted to make the requirements much clearer, that this is actually what is required by the technical guidance and what is required by the legal text or the implementation rule is another thing. So these are related, but this is the specification, if you wish, for providing the technical specification for providing the INSPIRE metadata. And this is the overall structure of the new document. So it is now structured in several conformance classes based on the target resource. So for example, there's a separate conformance class for datasets and dataset series, and another conformance class for services. And this is also split up, so there's the baseline conformance class, and if you by extending that, if you want to comply with the interoperability requirements, you also have to you also have to fulfill a couple of more requirements. So this is like inheritance model that is reflected also in the document. So you'll see that each of these conformance classes, which are from 1 to 7, it has its own chapter in the new document. And then there is these common requirements which are which have to be fulfilled by any of the conformance classes. So when you go down to the structure, you always have to do what is in the previous level and then the additional requirements in that particular conformance class. So this image is something that you probably want to keep while looking at the new document, because that makes it a bit more clear on what is included in which chapter. And also I've added some highlights of the annexes. So for example, in the Annex C, there's this long list of the element tables, which were previously pretty much the main content actually of the technical guidance. So you can still find them in the annex. There is a couple of mappings which are probably useful. In the Annex E, there is this mapping from the INSPIRE metadata element names into the technical guidance requirements. So if you want to check that how do these implementation rule element names map to the technical guidance requirements, you can use the Annex E. And in the Annex F, there is a mapping from the previous version of the technical guidance for this metadata, and also from the technical guidance for spatial data services 3.1 into the requirements in 2.0. So these are probably some highlights on the content that you want to take a look at when you're looking at the new document. Now, if you go more into details into each of the conformance classes, now the actual requirements there have been ordered according to the metadata record structure. So in the previous versions, those elements were presented in the order of the metadata implementation rule text, and in this new version 2.0, inside each of these conformance class, they are actually presented in the order of that they need to be given in the XML version of the metadata record. So there is a separate chapter for the direct properties of the MD metadata element, requirements for the identification info content, distribution info content, data quality info content, if applicable for that conformance class. So the idea is that if you look at the actual metadata record now, you can more easily find which of the requirements you should take into consideration when drafting the content for that particular section of the metadata record. Now I know that you probably can't see it. I'll go to it a bit more detail, but I'm just going to do a quick comparison between the actual formatting of the requirement text. So 3.1 version, the requirements look like this. So there is this description of the requirement chapter, and then there is a table underneath that, and then there are usually one or more technical guidance requirement texts in this dark bordered box. Now, if you look at this, it's not completely clear whether the table is actually part of the requirement or not, because the box in many cases don't go into that much detail, which is than presented in this table. So this was one of the things that we tried to make more clear in the new version, which contains a similar fashion in the description. But then there is this quote from the implementation rule. So this is the legal requirement which justifies this particular requirement. And then there is the actual requirement text. And that includes the identifier for this requirement. So this can be used for referring from outside into this particular requirement unambiguously. And then there is, for example, the exact XML structure that needs to be followed. So this is the element that you need to use for providing this metadata. So all this is now included in the actual requirement text. So it's hopefully a bit more clear what is the real requirement here. Also, the multiplicity of the element is now within the requirement text. Some other things that were improved, already mentioned these identifiers. Each of these 7 conformance classes now include a unique identifier, which is an URI, and which is a permanent identifier. So it's the intention that once the final document comes out, these URIs will be resolvable URLs which you can actually use and which point to the INSPIRE registry. So you get something that is referenceable from outside. The same thing for each of the requirements in the technical guidance. So there's an URI that you can use for pointing for this particular requirement in this particular version of the guidance document. Also, some other referencing improvements. For example, the INSPIRE code list values. In some cases, it's allowed to use free text in the actual metadata content elements, but you can kind of replace that free text by using this GMX anchor element, which can include or contain this URL for making these language neutral references to the code list values. And in addition to this URI, you can still provide the description of that particular value in the language of the metadata. So this is one of the things that we wanted to make the machine readable aspects better for the INSPIRE code list, and this GMX anchor is now used in many places in the new technical guidance document. Now, going to the actual changes in the metadata. So this is based on the MIG subgroup 8 work for most parts. I would like to say that you might have some questions, especially considering this metadata changes. That's obviously natural. Most of you are experts in the INSPIRE metadata. Since there are so many of you here today, I would like to take a look at if you have some questions, please feel free to use the chat feature also during the presentation to post them and ask them. And at the end of the presentation, we will try to take at least 1 or 2 of your questions if you've provided them, and then I'll try to answer them as best as I can. And if it's something that I can't answer myself, then I will promise to send that to the MIG group 8, or if it's about the validation to the MIG group, subgroup 5. So please feel free to send any questions to the chat. My colleague Laura will be taking the questions down, and we'll take a look at those questions at the end of the webinar today. Now to the back to the changes in the metadata. I already mentioned that one of the issues here were to clarify the unique resource identifiers. So in the use of those in the metadata. So in the old version, there was this requirement that if you need both the code space and the code for using these identifiers, for unique identifiers for the INSPIRE resources, you should use not the MD identifier element, but the extension of that, the RS identifier. And in the new 2.0 version, it's required that the identifiers is always an URI, and you should only use the MD identifier and the code element under that. And since the code is still free text, you are free to use either the GMX anchor, which, as I already mentioned, can contain the URI in a kind of more machine-readable fashion, or then you can use the URI just as the content of the character string element in there. But you have to always use the full URI, including the code space and the code. So this is a change in the unique resource identifiers. And connected to that is actually the issue about the coupled resource. So this is the mechanism for linking from the service metadata record into the datasets that are provided by that particular service. So it's an interlink between metadata records. And this was not very clear in the previous version. It was said that you have to use the operates on element within the service identification element in the service metadata. But the requirement text just said that this property shall be implemented as a reference. So that's not very clear requirements as is. And now it's more explicit that you shall use an URI, and that URI shall point to the metadata data identification element of the referred dataset. And how to actually make this link work, there are a couple of examples now also included in the document for actually making these kind of links that resolve to the particular element within the whole metadata record. So that hopefully is now easier to implement in a harmonized fashion. Some other things that is probably something that if you're a metadata provider, you need to take a look at is the limitation on public access. So in the previous version, there were 3 options for providing this, that you have to have at least one of the legal constraints, access constraints elements, or it can be other constraints element within that legal constraints element, or the third option, use the security constraints / classification. So you could use any of these in the 3.1 version, And this was narrowed down to make the metadata more interoperable in the version 2.0. So now the only allowed option is to use legal constraints, and within that you have to provide both access constraints element and other constraints element. And in the access constraints element, it's a fixed restriction code, other restrictions always, and then the actual limitation, which is one of the values of the INSPIRE code list provided for this purpose, goes to the other constraints element. So this is now much more in kind of detailed requirement in what is actually the mandatory way to do this when you want to comply to 2.0 version of the technical guidance. The other a bit similar thing is conditions applying to access and use. So in the 3.1 version, the requirement was to use the use limitation element in the metadata. And that contained free text description of the actual applied conditions for access and use. Now this has been changed. I will go to I will return to why this has been changed in the previous slide, but the change is that in the new version, you can only use the legal constraints elements again, and you have two options for that. You can use either the access constraints sub-element or use constraints sub-element, and it doesn't matter which you choose for both. You have to use the restriction code other restrictions. And in addition to either one of these, you have to provide at least one, also within the same legal constraints element, at least one other constraints element. And depending on whether there are some known conditions. So if there are no, you know that there is no conditions, for example, no fees, no special licensing of the data sets, then you shall use the reference to the INSPIRE code list, no conditions apply within that other constraints element. Or if the conditions are unknown, there's another code list value in the same code list for that, which is the conditions unknown. And if, on the other hand, there are some fees, some licenses that have been given for this particular dataset or dataset series, then the same other constraints element shall use a free text, shall include the free text description of those conditions. So it's the same thing that was previously the content of the use limitation element is now comes in the other constraints element. And the notable point is that if you have to provide both the limitations on public access and the conditions applying to access and use. And it can't be the same resource constraints element that contains these both, because otherwise it would be difficult to say that which is which. So now you have to provide two resource constraints elements, one for the limitation on public access and the other one for the conditions applying to access and use. Now, why we did want to change, or the group 8 wanted to change the use limitation into these other constraints, legal constraints. The reason is that the use limitation is actually intended for describing the applicability of the data or the metadata for a particular use. So it's not intended, the semantic meaning of it is not expressing the fees or licenses, but rather something like that you shall not use this data set for operational weather forecasting, for example. So this is the main reason why the change was made. So now you can use the use limitation for what is intended for, and then provide the information about the fees and licenses in another metadata element. So this was the main reason for the change. And if it wouldn't have been done, it would probably have caused some misinterpretation in the metadata when the use limitation text would contain something which is actually not a use limitation. Coming back to the code list references, I already talked about this a bit earlier. That has also been clarified a bit in the new technical guidance. So the ISO metadata code list references, there is now an explicit mention that the only format kind of mandatory thing is within those elements is the code list value attribute. And the reason for that is that according to the ISO specification, when you have, for example, a element which is date type code, you are only allowed to use the ISO values for that particular code list. So it's always a fixed set of values for a particular code list. So it doesn't really matter what the code list attribute refers to. You can't, even if you point that to your own version of a code list, it still doesn't allow you to provide additional values. So for this reason, it was it's now clearly mentioned that the both the code list attribute and the actual textual content is informative only. So all the metadata validators for 2.0 version should ignore the code list attribute, and it doesn't have to point to a live online resource, for example, which provides the values of this particular code list, because it should already be known by the validator which values are allowed. So this is for the ISO code list references in the metadata. And then something that is connected to the language neutral identifiers. So in many cases, the ISO metadata model and the XML encoding of it allows free text values for many of the elements, but to make the metadata more interoperable within the INSPIRE context, there is now INSPIRE code lists and INSPIRE code list values, which are now either required by some of the technical requirement elements or recommended in the technical guidance to be used for these particular elements. So as an example here, in the other constraints that we just talked about, the limitation on public access, this is an example how you actually provide the other constraints element that points to the INSPIRE code list value, which is the first of the reasons for limiting the public access. And this this is done by using the GMX anchor element. Now going to the spatial data services. So this is an kind of schematic which is copied from the spatial data services technical guidance. So it's just a kind of overview of what is meant by spatial data service within the INSPIRE context. So the metadata for services is given in this this actual metadata regulation, the legal text, and then there is this additional metadata requirements for particular kind of spatial data services, which are not INSPIRE network services and not some other kind of spatial data services. If there are invocable, so-called invocable, interoperable, or harmonized spatial data services, there are some additional metadata requirements given in the implementation regulation, implementing regulation for those kind of spatial data services. So these requirements have now been added also to this same document. So there are these additional conformance classes for invocable, interoperable, and harmonized spatial data services. And it was just not copied and pasted as is from the technical guidance for spatial data services 3.1 version, but there was an option to, at the same time, once these were this was included in the new document, it was a good chance to also revisit some of these requirement texts to harmonize them with the other requirements in the technical guidance for the metadata. So some of the changes were also made for these requirements. So some of the highlights that I would like to bring up here is that in the spatial data services technical guidance document, there was this INSPIRE specific extension XML schema, which was used for providing the category data of the spatial data service. So whether it is invocable, interoperable, or harmonized, and also for declaring the quality of service criteria for the service. And the other notable point was that in the previous version of the technical guidance SDS for the metadata was that the metadata shall include, it shall always include the access point for the metadata for the spatial data service. And in the previous version, the idea was, the requirements was that you use the function element within the transfer options to say that the function of this this online resource, this transfer option, is the actual access point for the service. And this has also been changed in the 2.0 version. So now there is no extended XML schema for spatial data services anymore. So rather the existing ISO schema domain consistency and conceptual consistency report elements are used for this category, and for providing the quality of service declarations. So there's no need to use an INSPIRE specific extension anymore for that. Also, the access point is now provided by the description element, not the function, because it was a bit difficult sometimes, because the function code list is actually restricted. So because it is this online function code from the ISO code list, it's a bit difficult to, or it's not actually strictly speaking allowed to actually extend that in that way, that you just use the same element name and would use a different set of the actual code list values. So now this is as is, you should use the function element as per the ISO requirements, and then the description element containing the GMX anchor, again referring to the access point URI of the spatial data service. So these are probably the most important changes for the spatial data service metadata. As far as I know, there are not very many of the spatial data service. Yes, that's a good point. Correction for my typo. So the previous version of the the previous version of the I have to check the versions. I think the previous version of the metadata technical guidance is 1.3, but I will have to check about the spatial data service technical guidance version. So I'll get back to that. That's a good point. Thank you. So anyway, this is you might want to look into more details about the spatial data services changes, but these are probably the most important changes here. Now, as you can see, some of the metadata requirements that were actually changed, and since there are already quite a lot of existing INSPIRE metadata out there, and some of the content now has to be changed for the new version, it has been decided that there shall be a transition period of 3 years that you can, so you don't have to be compliant with the 2.0 version immediately, but while that transition period is in place, both 1.3 and 2.0 version metadata required are considered compliant with the INSPIRE technical guidance for metadata. Now that in practice this means that the INSPIRE GeoPortal validator will validate metadata records against both versions, and the one that gives a better compliance result will be used as the compliance meter in the validator. So whatever version you are using, as long as it is compliant with either of these technical guidance requirements during these 3 years, is as valid. So you have 3 years to actually make the changes. And as this document is not endorsed officially yet, so the date for starting this transition period is still open. But my guess is that it'll probably start from the end of year or so, So you will most likely have time, and at least until the end of 2019, to make the changes. And I can't really promise this, but it's a reasonable assumption that these new conformance classes will be added in both the GeoPortal validator, which is now in place, and as new executable test modules in the new INSPIRE testing framework, which is the new validator. Sorry, new validator for INSPIRE metadata and datasets and services. So I know that this work is already in progress, but I don't have exact dates on when the validator tools will be compliant with the new conformance classes. Probably that work will start as soon as the document is endorsed or it's known that there will be no changes in the requirements anymore. So during the work of this new version, it was identified that not all the things that the group wanted to do could be done within this scope of this version. So, for example, the abstract test suites are still work in progress, but the idea is that these tests will actually not be included within this document, but as an online resource in a similar way that is already have been done for the previous metadata and the network services abstract tests. So something which is the current GitHub repository that I'll show a link to on the next slide, or something similar, but it'll be a live repository which contains the most up-to-date versions of the abstract test suites, and also probably refers to the executable test suites there. So of course there has to be when this there has to be one fixed version of the abstract test suites for this particular document version. So there has to be 2.0 version of the abstract test suites for each of these conformance classes. That's clear, but it might be that there are some minor fixes or corrections in there that do not require publishing a new version of the actual technical guidance document. So that needs to be decided case by case, probably by the MIG-T. But anyway, the endorsement of both these documents and the abstract text suites will be done by the MIG group. Some other things that are not fully covered here in this current version is the guidelines for community extensions of the INSPIRE metadata. So it's known that there are some communities that already are using extended versions of the metadata, INSPIRE metadata, to provide something, to provide additional metadata that is required by that community, like the ocean community, for example. They have these extended metadata schemas already in place and in use. And the current text does not forbid this kind of extension, but at least in this release candidate 4 version, there is still a requirement to use the unmodified ISO and OGC XML schemas for metadata, which is so the guidance is not completely clear on whether how to actually extend this INSPIRE metadata in a way that is still compliant with the INSPIRE technical guidance. Also, the XPath expressions in the new TG requirements are not very extension friendly in that way that they mention all the element names of the requirement, the required elements. So the whole XPath expression, which means that you can't really change the elements there from the INSPIRE or the ISO elements to an extended element with a different name and still comply with the actual XPath requirement. So there's still a bit work there. There are ways to address this, but for this particular version, these changes have not been made, at least yet. So this is something that might still change for the final version. Also, there is a new ISO standard for the metadata for geographic information, which is the 19115-214, and the XML encoding for that, which is the part 3, which has already been published only this year. And the nice thing about this is that this XML schema implementation now also includes the service metadata. So and also, I think a good point from the chat. Yes, it also means that you will have to use the other ISO standard there, which is the 19157. So this is a bigger change that personally I think that this needs to be done for INSPIRE metadata, but it was a deliberate decision not to do this in this 2.0 version because it would have been too much required from the metadata providers at this point. So this is probably something that will happen in a future version, but it's too early to say which version and which year this will happen. And there was already some questions for more information. So I would say the best information in what's happening in the actual this process to get this final version approved is your national INSPIRE contact point, and through that the MIG-T representatives. And you can find all those the meeting agendas for MIG-T and the minutes online in this address that I mentioned here. One of the good resources for validator is you go to the actual GeoPortal validator site, and then there's this tab, What's New, and that contains the newest additions to the validator. So that is something that you might want to keep look at. And also, if you want to look at the actual executable abstract text suites, they are available in GitHub in this address. So right now I would like to try to address a couple of questions that you've sent during the webinar here. So one of the obvious question is this current version release candidate 4 available, already publicly available? And to that question, I have to say that I'm not completely sure because this is, as I already mentioned, this is still, the editing work is still being done by the Joint Research Center staff. And actually, right now, today and tomorrow, there is a MIG-T meeting in INSPIRE going on. And as far as I know, the idea was to get this release candidate 4 version document available by this meeting, but I have to check from the website whether that's actually there. And I can certainly provide you with the link, or if I can find that. And I can send that in the kind of recap email for this webinar. So I will try to find out. I'm not sure whether that has been published by the Joint Research Center yet. Will this presentation be available after the webinar? Yes, all our webinars will be available in YouTube, and we will send you information when the webinar video is available. Then there was a question about the validator functionality. Why not display compliance with both versions, the old version and the new one? That is actually the intention. So you can check the validation against either of those, but the validator will automatically select for the compliance meter, which shows the kind of quick percentage of the compliance. So that will be the way to actually to see how that to see that you will not be penalized depending on which version you use during this transition period. Okay, then there was a question of could I sum up the assumptions that me as an editor of this document and the MIG group, which probably means the group subgroup 8, to make these changes. So I suppose you refer to the changes in the actual required metadata elements. So I try to already justify those in the presentation, but I would say that the main reason for making those changes was to kind of to make it more clear for the data providers on what is actually required. So if there are too many options, then it is too complicated for many. And that was the idea. The assumptions, I'm not sure what you actually mean by the assumptions there. So maybe we can come back to this in a private email exchange or something like that. Don't I think the period of 3 years is quite long for metadata amendment? I think it is long, but I think it also needs to be long enough because as you probably know, there are thousands of these metadata records out there, and depending on how your technical infrastructure works, you might actually have to change make changes in all of those, and not all of those changes necessarily can be automated. It really depends on how you use these elements before. It might be that you have to go case by case in some of these changes, which can be a lot of work. So for some data providers or metadata providers, this can be rather easy. So you have something that is already in the database. You just change some of the rules that the Discover service server, for example, is using to provide that information, and you're done. But some data providers might need more time, and this 3 years was what was considered enough, but not too long by the subgroup 8. But I suppose for that too, the final word comes from the MIG-T probably. Maybe actually from the MIG-P, because this is related to the policies, and it's more like a political decision on how much time is given for the member states to make these changes. Okay, my time here is about up. Thank you very much for all of you. It's been great to see so much interest in this topic, and I hope that I was technical enough, but not too technical in this. I dare to go a bit into details because I know that many of you are already experts in the INSPIRE metadata. And welcome to our other future webinars also. Thank you very much.